how do you determine the best use of land in your development project? Guys, I would suspect that you were probably a developer yourself and you've tried to figure out multiple ways to put a parcel together. Maybe you have land that you're in love with and it may not be the product type, or maybe it's not the perfect piece of land. Maybe it's too big and you're not sure, should you buy all the land? Should you just buy a chunk of the land? And what does that look like? Well, in this video, guys, I'm gonna go exactly through what I look for in a piece of land, how I determine its best use, do I lock up all the land, and really how we actually want to take a piece of land, create intrinsic value, and we want to increase the value as we go through the entitlement process, and how we do that in our developments, and why you should be looking for this, and why you shouldn't just be looking for the perfect piece of land for any development, because usually that doesn't exist. There is nothing perfect and entitled, and usually if that land is perfect and ready, it's gonna probably be more expensive than you're willing to pay. Guys, so if you don't know who I am, I'm Marc Kuhn. I'm a contractor for the last 15 years. I'm a developer for the last several years. I really try to create wealth through real estate, and that's what I do day to day. And I'm vertically integrated, like I said, with construction, development. I capital raise for projects, so I'm very familiar with this entire process. And being the general partner of multiple deals, meaning running the operations and trying to make luxury storage facilities really get off the ground, that's my niche. But in this one, I'm going to keep it a little more broader base. I may refer to storage, and I'm referring to my luxury storage product and really how we look for best cases, really the best use of land. And I think that can create a competitive advantage for you, and that's what you look for in development. So let's talk about that. The very first piece of this, the highest and best use of any piece of land. Really, when we're looking at luxury storage, so we understand our product type. We're not a multi-story storage facility, so we're not on the corners where gas stations and car washes appear and coffee shops. We don't need that level of exposure. What we like exposure to is maybe an interstate or being near maybe an on and off ramp. And in some cases we like to say, hey, we only like to get 2 rights to get into our facility, because we believe more and more rights, they may get confused on where they're going and the project actually doesn't perform as well. So it's just simple things like that that you don't know until you've actually developed these. But oftentimes when you're looking at land near interstates, because remember, well, in our product type, we have to all be on one level. So we need larger volumes of land. We don't need 2 acres. We need more like 5 to 10 acres. And in some cases, we can find 5 to 20 acres. Now, I think the biggest question you ask yourself as a developer, land is obviously some of the most expensive part of the project, right? We gotta lock up the land. We have to get entitlements done, meaning making sure whatever we're gonna build, and if it's storage, we need to get it zoned for light industrial storage space. And maybe you only need 10 acres and say we have 20 acres available. Well, now we look, okay, this is where most people say, well, I only need 1 piece of land. And most landowners want to sell everything, right? They want to get it all out the door. And you're going to get the best deal on the land. And you can put multiple options on the land. So say you only need the 10 acres. You build your facility, but I would have an option to buy that within a couple years, meaning that once your development is underway and you lock the land, you're not paying for it out of the gate, because I would tell anyone, make sure that you have all your entitlements done. And then when the entitlement process is done, that's when you buy the land. Now, back in the COVID era, that wasn't the case, right? People was the wild, wild west. They were just buying and then getting it entitled because debt was so cheap that they would just buy anything they could borrow on. And that entitlement process, you can go from $3 a square foot land to $6 a square foot. Now, if you have it zoned for storage, you go through a 6-month to 18-month process, really getting it entitled. That land value is going to increase value. I mean, that's why there's land flippers, right? Like, all they do is buy land, entitle it, and then resell it to developers like ourselves and try to get, the most they can for that product. And for us as developers, that saves a lot of time, right? We can go and just develop and be done and ready to go, start building, and we get to avoid that entitlement process. But as a developer in storage, specifically luxury storage, we entitle ourselves. We know the importance of that, and I think we like to be involved from the project from the very get-go. So we typically do all our entitlements ourselves. Not in all cases, but in most cases we are doing that. And so what do we have the 10 acres, we figured out, okay, hey, we can create value from the land. Maybe we bought it for $3 for this 20 acres, and we have it under contract, but the 10 acres, we for sure can build 1 facility on. This meets our criteria. Okay, great. Maybe we get an uptick in the land from $3 to $5. So great, we created our first piece, but now we have the second piece that we have an option. Maybe we need to execute within 1 or 2 years. Usually that's what we allow for. What are you going to add to that parcel? How does your parcel even get more valuable on your 10 acres you're developing? And how can you find the highest and best use for the other product? Well, it really goes into finding complementary business, right? What goes along with luxury storage? Maybe in this case, it's parking, because we don't allow parking outside the facility. And since we know there's a lot of small businesses moving into this area or into our luxury storage, because usually 75% of our tenant base is small business. It's the people graduating from their garage, moving into the businesses. I mean, you got to think, over the last, pre-COVID, there was about 3.5 million new businesses every year. Now, post-COVID, we're approaching 6 million new businesses. That's almost double. No one's working for anybody anymore. They all have small shop, and whether it's consulting or whether it's small Shopify type things, businesses, there's all these small contractors coming apart. So how can you add more revenue to your business? Well, maybe add parking, because we don't allow parking outside of our facility, but maybe they have trailers and trucks or whatever they have. Maybe you can add that, and that would help add more revenue to another business site. In some cases, I've seen an RV dealership. Oh, well, instead of parking, that may add revenue to our business model, but maybe we actually sell the parcel as an entitled parcel for storage, into some kind of RV park. Maybe it's an RV dealership. Maybe they sell and they need lots of parking, but they actually need more than you have. So maybe you parcel off the front 5 acres that face the interstate, or your high exposure area, and maybe you parcel that off. So, and then you keep the back, and maybe you sell that to them as parking. So you just have to be very creative, more or less, on what really can complement the actual business that we really like, which is the storage business in my case. But how do we piece off 5 acres and 5 acres, and why should you be interested in that? Well, just think if it was, just a large hotel that goes up, right? Maybe that's fine by you, and that's the highest and best use of the land. Now, it's highest and best use for the hotel, because you're probably not going to get the value out of it, especially if this is an industrial space, right? Like, I think about entitlements. How long is it going to take a hotel to lock up your land? And is that hotel actually going to add any value to your product type that you're actually developing? Probably not, right? And so it really gets you as in control of who is your neighbor, how does this help my business, meaning the storage business, and how can it help make a thriving light industrial flex space? Maybe you give another spot where you're doing condo shops, and you build and sell off the condo shops that have bathrooms and offices and all the things that you would need, and maybe they need extra space, so they rent from your storage facility. We do this in many of our sites, and it can be a great way. You can actually build and sell, make some revenue. I'm a buy and hold guy, so we love the storage facilities, but it could be another complementary business of why they need storage, why they need small bay light industrial flex space. That just isn't out there. You see these large 100,000 square feet buildings. What's going to go into that? What's going to go into this? There's builders out there that just speculation build these large industrial buildings where your minimal rental is 25 to 50,000 square feet. That just doesn't work in every market, And so understand where you're at, understand your land, understand your area, and whatever your niche is. Maybe you are into hotels. Well, maybe a gas station would be great next door. Maybe some kind of retail center that's high-end restaurants. You'll see all these complementary areas, but I see so many people get confused by complementary businesses going by each other. It can really either add value to your overall development or not add value, of course. And if you want to get the most value for your money, finding complementary businesses, locking up all the land. I try to lock up as much land as I can. I always think I always go back to my, Grant Cardone mentorship days. And he was like, if I would buy a facility, he's like, I would be overpaying because I pay a 4.5 cap. That's fine. He's like, what they didn't know though, is that I was buying the facility next door. And maybe it was 150 units for a 4.5 cap, but he was buying the facility next door for a 6.5 cap. And what it did is create one management team, so it lowered his expense ratio, and he was able to acquire both apartment buildings, drop the expense ratio, actually have 2 well-operated facilities of 300 units total, and with one management team, which ended up reducing a bunch of expenses for them. And, I think one was a little older, one was a little newer, so it helped balance the whole thing out, and phenomenal project for them, right? And then when you start selling from 150 units to 300, it's just scale, right? And then you can can really compress your cap rates, and that's when we get happy as a developer. But you have to understand, think outside, think creative when you're doing these business models, because if you don't, you're likely leaving money on the table. And I try to lock up as much land as you can around you, not only for the control, but maybe you start to see some of the opportunities or who is going in that area, because if you have the land under contract, they're going to still submit offers, and they can, and that landowner has to share them with you if that's in your contract. That will help your business. So make sure you're locking up as much land. Guys, if you are a developer and you follow me for those reasons, I hope you got some value here. It's definitely something I get asked about all the time. And how can you get, locking up more land? Don't be scared of that. Even if you're not going to develop it, I think just seeing the opportunities coming around your development going on can really help you out. Guys, please like and subscribe, share this with somebody. That's where I get value of actually sharing these messages, and not getting rich on YouTube by any means, but me getting my message out. You sharing this with somebody can really help someone else out. So appreciate y'all. I'll see you in the next one.